It is Thursday, July 29th here in Draft Sharks Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the Draft Sharks podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff, and joining me tonight is a special guest making his second appearance on the show. He is the back-to-back winner of the Football Guys Championship on myffpc.com. He is a co-host of the First and 15 podcast. He is an actual real-life doctor, a surgeon, and director of the Texas Allergy and Sinus Center. He is at Skywalker2000 on Twitter, and he'll be competing for the second year in a row in the Draft Sharks Invitational coming up soon. Abib, Agbetoba, welcome back to the show, and thanks very much for joining me tonight.
Oh, man, thanks for having me. It feels very, very good to be back on with you guys.
It's nice to have you. I got to pick the brain of a two-time champ, and we're definitely get into that. I invited the good doctor back for a couple of reasons. One, I'm seeking a full-time job managing his rosters in season because I'm sure it's getting a little unwieldy at this point.
I could use the help.
I'm available, so we could talk about that after the show. I can do a little caddying maybe. Number two, though, Dr. A and I recently drafted together in an FFPC main event league. So we will be competing directly for a shot at that big prize this year. We will get to that draft in a little bit. But first, I wanted to do a little bit of setup just so I and anybody watching or listening knows where you're coming from, Doc. So tell us, how many Football Guys Championship drafts have you done already this year?
Ooh, that's a tough question right out the gate. Let's just say enough.
All right, we'll take that. Definitely somewhere in the double digits. Would you say more than 20 at this point?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I'm close. Yeah. Somewhere
in that range. How many FFPC main event entries are you planning to do this season?
However many credits I have from last year. So I think I did about 5 or 6 last year, and I think I have about 6 or 7 credits this year. So hopped in a few slow drafts thus far. That's kind of kept the edge off from me wanting to hop in a Football Guys on a nightly basis. So those are nice. They kind of scratch the itch just a tad bit. And then maybe I'll do one or two the standard fast main events, and we'll see. I'm hopeful that I can get into one of the live Vegas main events, but we'll see what the schedule looks like.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been playing these big tournaments?
2019 or 2018, I think, was my first time really, going into Football Guys. And I think, like most people who start off, you start off kind of, small and, get your feet wet a little bit. I had, I think anywhere from 2 to 3 teams. For me personally, it was definitely, I don't want to say an eye opener, but an awakening.
You were awake by year 2, it turns out, huh?
Well, I caught a lucky streak there, but it definitely took a little bit of time to kind of learn the format. And so I think, if you're going to go in the first year, depending on how well you are familiar with tight end premium and the 2 flex position and the roster constructions with FFPC, you may want to kind of start off with a few teams here or there. But hey, who knows?
Yeah, you said it was eye-opening. And so for like anybody else who might even be an experienced fantasy player and thinking about jumping into these or already have jumped in, what do you think are like, a couple of key things that they could do to get acclimated and to, hit the ground ready to compete?
Preparation is always key. Specifically for this format, understanding the scoring system, understanding, your starting positions. FFPC, I think, is very, very unique. Not, I think the tight end premium makes it unique, but I think the fact that you can start 2 flex positions from either the tight end, wide receiver, running back position also make it very unique. Mm-hmm. There's only 2 wide receivers and there's only 2 running backs. So, other formats like NFFC where you start 3 wide receivers, there's definitely a different mentality that you have to bring when playing in FFPC. And I think players who kind of go back and forth, sometimes it may be hard to go from one format to the other. So I think it's really understanding your league, studying ADPs and draft boards, having a good sense of where players are going. Is very key. You can try and plan in terms of trying to determine, how you want to start your team off. whether you want to start off with 2 running backs and then, and then hit wide receivers or grab one of those tight ends early. But I'll tell you, for me personally, every draft is different, so you never know what's going to fall to you in the first round. So just be prepared to not follow a particular plan that you have in place.
Yeah, it seems like whatever format you're drafting, flexibility is always important, because especially when you get into some of these live drafts, there's some crazy picks that go in these drafts. You might have somebody that you're sure you can get in round 4 and he's gone. You might have somebody shockingly go ahead of you in round 1, Kyle Pitts going in the middle of that round. So
absolutely.
Yeah, flexibility is always important. Have you done a lot of best ball drafting, either in this format or others, to either prep or to just supplement you and kind of keep from scratching that itch every night with the live drafts, like you said?
Yeah, honestly, I don't do too many best balls. I did in the past. I had some fairly good success. It just it's just something that doesn't really call to me. I don't get excited about it. I don't feel like it helps me out when it comes to the redraft leagues. I like the in-season management. I love the draft, but I really like the in-season management. I love to be able to, watch the games on Sunday, as many games as I can, really kind of take that all in, and then make a decision the following Sunday as to, who I want to start, who I want to sit, who I want to pick off waivers. I really enjoy that aspect of it, even, if it's a large amount of teams and that takes a long amount of time. So for me, the best ball, I don't know how much it helps out in terms of prep. I think it's to me, it's a different skill set. And when I do best ball, I'm putting on a different hat and I approach it very differently. So I used to do that back in the day. And I found that it didn't really help me out all that much. So if I'm doing a best ball, I'm primarily doing a best ball to win it. So I maybe done 1 or 2 underdogs just because of, again, free credit. I'm cheap and frugal, so I love free credit. And I've done a handful of the best balls through FFPC, again, credit and some a couple of the guys through Twitter who've thrown down the gauntlet and
you're answering challenges.
Exactly.
So even if you're not a best ball player, but you are a high volume player in these tournaments, do you find yourself adapting any of the kind of building a portfolio of players that's more of a best ball strategy than it is generally a roster management kind of league? Do you find yourself making sure that you're not overexposed to certain players or paying attention to your player shares? Or are you still just, focus on your favorites or focus on building the way you like to from the specific draft spots?
Yeah, I mean, I typically want to be overweight on the players that I like and the players that I'm high on, and I want to be underweight on the players that I am not a fan of or don't believe in or feel that their ADPs may be a little bit overinflated. I don't really approach it from a standpoint of, okay, I really don't like player X, but maybe I just want to get a few shares. I'm fine going all in. I'm fine being wrong on a player. One thing I am is very stubborn and very fixed in my convictions. So for good or bad, that's something that I think I bring to my drafts as well. But I don't go through my player ownership per se. I'm aware of it, and I'll take a look at it when certain news arises. I wonder, okay, how many Darrell Henderson shares do I have? And so I'll go look at that. But really what I do is I go team by team, and I'm really looking at my team builds and my team constructions. And it's an interesting exercise to do about a month after you have drafted, or maybe even a few weeks, to go back and look at it and think to yourself, okay, let me look at the entire draft board. Let me go kind of team by team and compare my team versus those, and just really look at my team and ask myself, is this a team that can compete? And if I feel like it's not, or I feel like it's weak in certain areas, then I try to adjust that. And then, I have a tendency to, especially earlier on, to try and really lock down that running back position in the first round for sure. But also in the second round and sometimes in the third round. So I'll find my, self after going through and doing an audit of my teams, wanting to, hop into drafts and maybe do a bit different a draft build or draft or team construction. Maybe go with one of the earlier tight ends in the first 2 rounds, or go after the a wide receiver or two in the first 2 rounds. So I'm usually more looking at it from a team standpoint as from a player standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Now, I heard you guys talking on the podcast the other day about whether it's Darrell or Darrell. Did you settle on Darrell there, it sounded like, for Darrell Henderson?
You know what? I am terrible with names, like absolutely terrible with names. So, it's just one of those things that, I'm going to have to try and get better with this
It's funny. That particular name goes back to one of the first fantasy leagues I played in with guys I worked with at the newspaper years ago. And one of the guys in the league drafted Darrell Jackson, the wide receiver from the Seahawks, and announced him as Darrell Jackson, which, of course, the rest of us being newspaper guys were like, that's not how you say his name. And certainly let him hear it every single time it came up.
Yeah, and I do it all the time. I do it with a lot of players because some of these names kind of all sound the same, and I love all sports. Football is definitely my passion when it comes to watching the game and playing fantasy football. But I love to play basketball. I love to watch basketball. So I have these basketball names in my head too. So when it comes to like someone like Michael Carter, immediately it's Michael Carter Williams to me, MCW. Like that's his name to me. Like that's all that I see. So I constantly call him MCW.
Just make sure that you don't call Patrick Mahomes Pat, or you're going to get his mom on you.
Exactly.
So you talked about looking at it from a team perspective more than players. What's your process on players heading into drafts? Do you do your own projections? Do you have a source or a few sources that you trust that you tend to lean on and then kind of go from there with your personal favorites?
My process is really, I just try to take in as much information as possible. Mm-hmm. I probably have a subscription to every fantasy football website, including yours. I love the new format, by the way. The website is amazing.
Thank you.
But I really, there's just so many creative and innovative studies out there, very talented fantasy analysts such as yourself. You guys do such a great job of putting together, information for us to really decipher through and determine what's relevant, what's irrelevant, and what can help us out in the drafting process. So, certain things I may not find as valuable, and others I do. And so I just try and take in as much information as possible, because I feel like if I can go through each website and I'm aware of everything that's out there, it'll set me, a little bit further ahead than the average drafter per se. Mm-hmm. And so I think, like with anything in this age, information is key. And so I want that information. I want as much as possible. And I want and that's through Twitter, that's through websites. When it comes down to projections, I don't do my own projections. I honestly don't really pay attention to projections. Mm-hmm. I may look at them from time to time just to try and put things into context, to try and understand maybe why, if I'm high on a player, why isn't the field higher on the same player? Or if I'm lower on a player, what's the field think? What are they projecting? But it was something that, from a projection and a ranking standpoint, I used to rely very heavily on. And I don't know. I feel like, it can be a bit of a crutch and a handicap in more of a negative way than a positive way. Mm-hmm. I think if you do enough prep, and if you are, I don't want to say seasoned, but, if you've been playing for a few years, a lot of these players, and you're watching the games on Sunday, your gut feeling is basically all of this information, all of these different, data points, all of these different analytic takes and whatnot. It's basically all of that combined. And then eventually you just, sort of kind of on your own determine where you have said player ranked amongst this tiers. So.
Yeah, I think anytime you get more experience in something, and especially at the volume at which you draft and after you've done it for years, you get to know it. And the gut feelings that for some people might be, I watched this guy Sunday and he's not that good. At some point it turns into, no, I've played this game and I know how this is going to go and I know what's possible for him. Projections are obviously important in that they kind of set up what's realistic, but it can also get in the way of what is possible, because
Yeah,
sometimes, like the Bills last year, for example, we don't really know what's realistic because we don't know what changes might be coming. So
absolutely.
I definitely agree. There's room for some of those, personal gut feelings.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I'm from a a data and analytics standpoint versus non-analytics. I don't even want to say I'm in between. I think it's all important. I think you want to use as much as you can, and then ultimately come up with your own decision on where you are on a certain player.
Mm-hmm. So, with that in mind, who are a few players that you're really high on that you find yourself targeting a lot this year?
Do I have to? No.
You don't have to. You can give us.
No.
You give us one. Give us one.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I think we covered quite a bit. So for me, it's really dependent on their ADP. So this definitely changes. So I think early on it was Jerry Jeudy for me. He was going in the 7th round, and so that was a lock button pick for me. Now I'm gravitating towards a guy like Brandon Cooks. I think it's extremely undervalued. He's typically going in the 8th round, maybe 9th round in certain drafts. And so that's a guy that, is the number 1 wide receiver on his team. And I know he plays for the Texans, but there just seems to be a stigma with both Brandon Cooks and obviously the Texans. For whatever reason, people don't like Brandon Cooks, and he's done it year after year with multiple QBs. Granted, those QBs were, some of them were Hall of Famers. Yeah, they're pretty good. But, he's in a situation where the Texans have a tremendous amount of vacated targets. He is the veteran and best wide receiver on that team by far, in my opinion. And we can project, quite a few negative game scripts. I don't think the Texans are going to be as bad as everyone else thinks they're going to be, but I think they're going to be in a number, the majority of their games they're going to be, trailing or coming from behind. And I think that's, him paired with Tyrod, or even if it's the rookie Mills or backup. I think regardless, he's going to be able to produce, at the very least, provide you flex 2 appeal. But I think he definitely has the potential for wide receiver 2 type numbers.
Yeah, I think people started out mad at Brandon Cooks just because he got Drew Brees and then Tom Brady and then Deshaun Watson last year. Yet, we're not giving him some credit for playing with Jared Goff too. So he did some time in purgatory, but he's got to. He could reach 150 targets this year, so he could be in a bad offense with bad quarterback play and be in good shape.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I mean, if Deshaun Watson does play, it's rocket ship.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
So, who are a couple guys that you are not touching at ADP?
I would probably say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers backfield. I am all for taking a shot at ambiguous backfields. And when I say take a shot, I mean, you do your deep dive, you go down a rabbit hole, and then you figure out, okay, I see this guy as having significant potential, and I really like his value at ADP. But for me, that Tampa Bay Buccaneers backfield, I really think it's going to be a 3-headed monster. And I think barring injury, it's going to be tough for one guy to excel. I think without the addition of Gio Bernard, I would be more than happy to take either Fournette and yes, even Ronald Jones, where they're currently going. But with Gio coming in, I just have a lot of respect for Gio. I love what he does out of the backfield. I really do see him in that James White role. But what really scares me with Gio is that James White saw touches in the red zone and at the goal line when he was with the Patriots. And the way that Brady commands an offense, if they're moving fast, he gets down the field pretty quickly. When he sees a weakness on that defense, he's rushing guys up to the huddle. He's not letting the defense come to a huddle or swap out players and bring guys off the sideline. And so if Gio's on the field, he just may be on the field for an entire series. And I don't think he has any issue giving the ball to Gio at the goal line. And I think Gio's a little bit better in between the tackles, a little bit better than James White is, but maybe not, the pass catcher that James White is. But I think that role, I really do see him locking down that pass catching role, that third down back role, and that, the hurry up offense, et cetera. So that leaves, Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, in my opinion, really, taking, splitting that, in between the 20s role, some of the goal line work, obviously, But, when it comes to pass catching and obviously, the FFPC being in a PPR format, I just, it's one of those things. I don't want to have to, guess which week one of those guys is going to score a touchdown or, go for 80 plus yards.
Yeah, that's what's made me more interested in that backfield for best ball drafting than for lineup setting, because somebody's going to score points. It's going to be a good offense. And if I don't have to guess who it is in a given week, then I'll take shots at whoever. I'm not quite as high on Gio Bernard, but I could see it, and I'll be curious to see how it sorts out during training camp. If they, fall, and I think our draft, I ended up taking Leonard Fournette in like round 10, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So, if they slide, then I'm willing to take a shot and see where the backfield goes. But I agree, as we get toward more of the roster management in season, that's just going to be a headache. I'm not sure anybody's just going to take the job and run with it.
And that's the unique thing about the additional game this year. I think that's an important thing that's kind of gone underlooked or maybe hasn't really been talked about all that much. I think teams are well aware of that, and we're starting to see it. We've already been kind of moving towards this running back by committee, or even the starting running back being spelled fairly often. Seeing guys get 20 carries in a game is just, outside of Derrick Henry, is just so rare these days. So I think teams are really going to be cautious, especially these teams that are Super Bowl contenders or playoff contenders. With the other side of that coin is, Fournette is a guy to stash. Gio gets hurt. You got the guy that not only can see work at the goal line and in between the 20s, but also, someone, probably the bet to see the passing downs work between him and Rojo. So if I were going to go with one, I'd probably want to go with Leonard Fournette there.
Yeah, the way to work that backfield is to not overcommit to anybody and just wait and take somebody who drops. Because if you want, you can write a story for any of those guys.
Absolutely.
You can say they brought back Leonard Fournette and he barely had any preseason last year. Or you can say Ronald Jones is the younger one and he's been the more effective runner and he's still ascending. Or you can say they signed Gio Bernard for a reason. They could have gotten James White and they didn't. They signed Gio Bernard. So we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Absolutely.
So as I've mentioned a couple times now, we did do that main event league. We're going to get to that for recapping now. And as I put up the board, what did you think of the slow draft format for those?
Oh, it was painful.
And I asked you that only because I know that you believe that already. And I find it kind of ironic that a doctor is complaining about the wait time.
Oh, if you've ever seen me in a doctor's waiting room when I'm the patient, it's just uncalled for. And, I'm sure my patients could tell you, depending on the clinic day, that the wait can be pretty gruesome as well, too. But that being said, I found it very, it was from a different perspective of, when you're on the clock and your typical draft and you have a minute to draft, you got to move and think quickly. And you just go with that gut feeling. Being on the clock for 6 hours plus, you have the time to say, okay, well, let me be 100% sure about this. And then you really go down the rabbit hole. And so I actually like the slow drafts as a replacement maybe for the best ball drafts when it comes to prepping for your just typical redraft leagues on a fast clock. Because now you can, and I'm not condoning waiting 6 hours for a pick. Okay. I've done it a couple times. My apologies to those who were in who were in that league. I was on a flight and maybe one pick I really did take that amount of time. But no, seriously, you can spend some time to really try and figure out, okay, maybe you think that you like, Justin Jefferson over at DK Metcalf, and then you do a deep dive, you look into the offense, you do the coaching assessment, you go back and look at previous stats, maybe you look at some projections, you look at the team as a whole, and then you sort of kind of come to a conclusion that, wait, okay, I think I actually like DK Metcalf significantly more than Justin Jefferson. And so from here on out, now you figured out that ranking in your particular tier. So, sometimes you can have these rankings pre-draft and, but when you're on that clock, it's a completely different thing. That's really when if you're on a guy or if you like a guy more than another guy, especially when they're within the same tier. So it was interesting from that format, but yeah, it's a slow burn.
Yeah.
It's a slow burn for sure.
I like them. I like having multiple going on at the same time just because it's tough for me to find like 2 and 3 hour blocks where I can just
Yeah.
sit down and draft at least without making my wife unhappy. But it definitely takes patience. It helps to have multiple going on at once. And I agree. You see fewer of the crazy picks in these kind of drafts because people have time to reason out what they want, to plan it before their turn, and to think all they want when they're on the clock. So it's different drafts. I want to get into a few more of the live drafts so I can try to capitalize on some of those crazy picks that go. But let's get into your team here. You got Dalvin Cook at the number 3 spot overall. He's been an auto pick for me at number 2 this year. I'm taking him every time I'm second. So I think that you were fortunate to get him, even in the tight end premium where it was Travis Kelce who took that second spot. Followed that with Najee Harris in round 2. He was the 14th running back off the board. His ADP now sits a little bit earlier than that in all FFPC formats. So how did you feel about that start to your team?
Oh, I love the start. Dalvin Cook always makes me a little bit nervous, just given the injury history. And it's almost like you're rolling the dice again and again and again, until you crap out, because he just, he was able to stay healthy for the majority of last year. But he's just such a dynamic player when he's on the field. And, with all of these first round running backs, anything can happen to anyone. CMC was thought to be indestructible until last year, obviously what happened. So, and everyone was a little bit weary of Derrick Henry coming off a massive workload the year prior, and he was able to pull through. So, I don't want to say I completely ignore injury, but you can't play this game with too much caution. So, love getting Dalvin Cook there. I mean, when I can start off with one of these, top 2 tier running backs, I mean, it's really ideal. And it was even, better from a standpoint if I didn't have to make that decision between Travis Kelce and someone else. It's always a tough decision.
Yeah.
And then the Najee Harris pick, I'm very, high on Najee this year. I'm high on a lot of these running backs. So it's one of those things where it's just like, take your pick. And on any given day, I may, say I like one more than the other, or kind of getting back to the ownership percentage question. If I really like a lot of guys, okay, I got this amount of shares of Chubb. Okay, I need to get this amount of shares of Antonio Gibson, et cetera. So for me, the Najee pick was such an easy pick because I have him significantly higher ranked than that. And for someone in that tier or my tier to fall to me at that, be able to pair him with someone like a Dalvin Cook, I absolutely love that start. I understand the O-line issues, but I think he's going to be one of the few workhorse and potential bell cow backs that we see this year.
Yeah, I mean, Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry are on their own level for workload. And Najee Harris, it seems like Pittsburgh might be trying to get him to that level right away. I wouldn't be surprised if you have a couple of 70% carry share guys. Trey Sermon, is that a player that you like this year, or was he kind of a chance worth taking in this particular draft after you laid that solid running back base? I believe he was your round 6 pick here.
Yeah. I'm not a person who takes a lot of rookies. I'm very skeptical from a standpoint of there's just so many variables in terms of how they are going to acclimate to the NFL, how they're going to adjust to their new system, et cetera, especially when it kind of comes to running backs and being able to learn a system. I think one of the biggest issues with Darrell Henderson was just that, he wasn't used to sort of kind of running that type of scheme, when he, made the switch from, Maryland to the Rams. So you never know how those things are going to go. We saw that with Jonathan Taylor last year. And and that to me was a situation where he was kind of getting used to, playing at the next level, but just getting used to his O-line, getting used to the blocking scheme, et cetera. So I typically am, shy away from rookies, but every year I have a handful of rookies. Last year, I planted my flag on Cam Akers because I was okay with, taking a stab at him in the 5th and 6th round. Didn't feel like it was a huge amount of draft capital, but thought it could maybe pay off. And so I see Trey Sermon very much in that way this year. I really do see him as having, being a 3-down back. I don't think that he's going to be a bell cow, but I do think that he can play on all 3 downs. So he should see some work in the passing downs. But I want running backs from, teams in great offensive systems if they're not going to be bell cows. So, we all are aware of how great the San Francisco O-line is and how they may even be better than this year. And that, Shanahan running scheme, that, zone running scheme. So I felt like he's a perfect fit for that system. I love what I saw in college. He was my favorite running back actually coming out of college. As far as, if I had to kind of rank them. So yes, it's a bit of a, I don't want to call it a reach, but a bit of a play to win type pick, because we don't know who's going to be starting week 1 and how many carries he's going to be getting. But that San Francisco schedule, and, kind of talked about strength of schedule in the past, but I like that playoff schedule. And I like the, especially during the money tournament weeks, I like their schedule. And if Trey Lance is back there, I think it's also going to, really help out the running game as well. So, so many reasons why I love Trey Sermon, and I like where we got him.
And I do think laying Dalvin Cook and Najee Harris in the first 2 spots where you're going to be starting them every week, it makes it easier to take a shot on somebody who you might understand there's some risk. How much attention do you pay to the playoff schedules for a large field tournament like this?
Yeah, so I do pay attention, and it's one of those situations where you got to just take the gamble. Like, for instance, Christian McCaffrey has a week 13 bye. I don't care when his bye is. I'm going to be taking Christian McCaffrey at the 101. And
then I think he faces the Bucks twice in those final few weeks too.
Exactly. And so sometimes you just got to bite the bullet. But then I get to a guy like Miles Sanders, who I actually like this year, but having to face the Washington football team twice in the tournament weeks, and then the other questions that he has, I moved from having him as a late 3rd round pick to now, an early 4th, mid 4th round pick. And so I'll still take him, but he's moved down the board for that reason. So for me, when it comes to strength of schedule, you need to be at the extremes. Anything in between, I'm really not considering it. So I need to be able to look at the schedule and just know, or have a strong belief that those defenses that you're facing are going to be in the bottom half or bottom quarter of the league, as far as their run defense or as far as their pass defense. And then depending on the position, sort of kind of look at it and say, okay, anticipate, this running back to have the easiest, strength of schedule when it comes to running backs. But if they're sort of kind of in the middle, especially for instance, take a team like the Vikings. I expect them to be significantly better, on the defensive side of the ball this year than they were last year. So, teams like that, I place less emphasis on strength of schedule. But other teams, sadly, my Texans, they fall in that bucket of,
it's going to be a friendly spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know in doing our strength of schedule articles, I tried to, make educated guesses at what will be the worst matchups, what will be the best matchups, and then just not assume anything about the middle, and make sure to tell people along the way that these are merely educated guesses. Some of this will change. A lot of it could change, and make sure you don't overrate it, but it's kind of a tiebreaker thing.
Yeah, your methodology and the process that you took, I think it's very, very important to be very, explanatory to some degree, as far as, okay, this is why I chose these metrics to determine, who had the easiest strength of schedule for wide receivers, and that allows a reader to be able to determine, okay, based off of, his criteria, based off of, his metrics and his, whatever points you use to come up with, your rankings, I feel comfortable with this, or there's a certain part of this that I don't feel comfortable with it. So, and then you can try and gauge, how much weight you want to put towards that. So, but I definitely took a look at you guys' strength of schedule, and for the most part, I was in a lot of agreement when it came to, especially the running back strength of schedule.
Yeah, I finally understand why teachers always wanted me to show my work on math tests too. It was annoying back then, but now I know it, so you can trust the answer.
It's always about the why.
That's right. Now, you got Russell Wilson in round 7 as the 7th QB off the board in this draft. How are you approaching QB in general, coming off such a high-scoring year at the position? Guys are getting pushed up a little bit. It hasn't been as extreme as we've turned from best ball to full season drafting, I don't think. But how are you? Is there a level where you're trying to make sure you get a quarterback before you're past this guy?
So I guess I got to first say that I did this draft with Deo, my partner in crime, at 1st and 15th. So we went, we both, I had the first 2, then he had the next 2, and we just alternated with 2 picks, every 2 picks. So he's actually the one that chose Russell Wilson. I was fine with that pick. This year is very unique for me when it comes to quarterback drafting. Typically, I'm someone who wants to wait, but I think the quarterback landscape is very, very different this year. You have this top 1 to 2 tier. I just say they're all 1 tier of the quote unquote Konami code running backs, the guys who can really kill it on the ground and really get you those QB1 overall weeks. And then you just have a lot of guys who just have a lot of potential. And then you have some of the veteran, passing quarterbacks like Tom Brady or even an Aaron Rodgers, where through volume and through the amount of TDs that they're projected to throw can provide serviceable weeks. So I'm all over the place. I think in the ideal scenario, I draft a quarterback late because if you look through those 6 rounds and even the 7th round, there's some quality players there, and I still want to fill out my starting roster from a wide receiver, tight end, and running back position. But you have to win at quarterback. I mean, I just look back at some of my teams from last year that just didn't make it, and there were some monsters there that didn't make it because maybe I had Matt Ryan as the quarterback. And I think the thing when that you need to think about when approaching quarterback is not their overall end of year numbers. You have to think about it from a standpoint, okay, if I start said quarterback on this week, how confident am I in that he's going to produce me, top 12 QB numbers? And am I going to be playing a game that I can't win? So then I start him 1 week, he performs badly, then I bench him and start another guy because I'm streaming, and then he goes off on my bench and the other guy is very mediocre. You could find yourself down 3-0 or 0-3 when it comes to how accurately you're starting quarterback. So those things matter to me. So I think when I'm paying up for a quarterback, it's more so I'm paying for that, not having to manage every week. A guy like Lamar and Kyler, Patrick Mahomes, you're just going to be starting every single week, and you don't have to play that game. I think there's going to be a lot less volatility versus if you're playing the Ryan Fitzpatrick, Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence, those type of games. And I love someone like Trevor Lawrence and those guys. And you asked about sleeper picks earlier. I think everyone's on this guy, Trey Lance. I mean, he's someone that I'm trying to get in every league as well, even understanding that he may not start any games this week or this year. Sorry.
Now, are you usually taking 2 quarterbacks? Because you talk about wanting to start somebody every week, and I was just kind of scrolling through the board a little bit and seeing how many teams in our league only took 1 quarterback. And I think it's 3, maybe 4. I'm surprised that the Joe Burrow team didn't take a second quarterback. But are you normally taking a second quarterback regardless of who you end up with as your first, just to help with team management?
Yeah. So if I end up with someone like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, or Josh Allen, for the most part, I'm not taking a second quarterback. If I do, it's something random happened, and I can't explain it. Those teams,
who's your partner picking that one?
Yeah, exactly. But when we get to that next tier, the Russell Wilson tier, and I love Russ this year, and I'm hoping this year we put it into the wild swings from the first half of the season to the second half of the season, or the second, or and it seems to change every year. But I think the new OC, Waldron coming in, I think that will allow high upside offense with a lot less volatility. But someone like that, even with that being said, someone like that, knowing that he struggles against some of the teams in his division who have, elite defenses like the Rams, and I think the 49ers will be one of the elite defenses this year as well. I may draft a second quarterback just in the event that, when I've seen him for, I've had a chance to see him for 3 to 4 weeks. If I'm not quite comfortable, I'm 100% fine in sitting Russell Wilson. So I'm someone who's not going to just take, not just going to blindly start, let's call him a second or third tier star because, you're supposed to start your stars. It's one thing if it's Lamar, Kyler, Mahomes, CMC, Mara, guys like that. It's another thing if it's, someone who's in a tier below.
Yeah, and I think you've got the cutoff just about right too. I mean, I'd probably throw Dak Prescott into that group as well, where you're almost definitely starting that guy every single week, and you can go without a second quarterback. Russell Wilson definitely could be that guy this year, but after the way he played last year, I would probably want to insure him as well and make sure that he's more like first half Russell Wilson than second half. And I mean, especially if you can get Ryan Tannehill at a solid spot like that.
Absolutely. And I'm
you
fine.
waited. Say that again.
I said, and I'm fine sometimes in some drafts taking 3 quarterbacks. I mean, like if it just so works out that I'm like missing out on quarterbacks, ideally because I'd like to get a quarterback when they fall into me as opposed to reaching. But if I'm just missing out left and right, and I end up with the Joe Burrow as my starting quarterback, and I'm okay like taking 3 quarterbacks. Usually one of those guys is someone like Taysom Hill, and then maybe I pair him with the Trevor Lawrence. That's not a position that, again, I put a lot of emphasis on trying to make sure that I'm right in that position. And if I need to do that, in terms of playing the softest matchups on a weekly basis until I feel comfortable, I will roster 3 quarterbacks. I think a lot more weight on that position than I think most. I think most people are saying, the typical dogma when it comes to quarterback is just draft one or stream them. But again, I go back to how accurately are you starting, set quarterback. So.
Right. And then you're also trusting what's on the wire and trusting your ability to manage all of your teams and hit the wire and get the right guy all the time.
Especially, in a league format where they're, the roster, 20 spots, during COVID, we're seeing a rise, in numbers. And so, who knows what's going to be happening, when the season opener comes around. So we saw what happened last year. You were kind of caught with your pants down. It was not a fun thing. So I prefer to be prepared at that position, because some of these later guys that we draft, when I'm spending a 19, 20 round pick on Taysom Hill, people are, asking, why are you, drafting the 3rd quarterback? It's because there are going to be guys on waivers. There always are, and after I get to, watch those first 2 games, I'm fine like spending, a good amount of my fab early on guys that I think have significant potential. So I'm never worried about, wasting a roster spot. The entire waiver wire is my roster.
Yeah, especially when not wasting is taking somebody like Jared Dokes. I mean, we'll see what happens. You guys waited until round 10 for your first tight end in this draft. Only 2 other drafters in our league waited longer than that. Do you tend to wait on a tight end in FFPC drafts, or is that just kind of how the picks fell in this particular draft?
Yeah, honestly, I approach it the same way that I approach quarterback position. Basically want value to fall to me. So it's rare that I'm reaching for a guy. I definitely have a handful of tight ends that I'm very, very high on. But within those first 6 rounds, I'm not, I don't want to really reach for anyone. I think Travis Kelce is fine, where he goes, almost anywhere in the first round. Same thing with Waller. I can't argue against taking Waller at the 103, 104, 105, because he has Travis Kelce upside. And I got to give credit to Deo, who's, I think, first one that we're going to put that thought into my head. But I think he's right. You just heard nothing but drum beats about how he may even have his role a little bit more expanded. So, but for me, again, I try to get those guys at value. Usually I'm not going that early at tight end. I'm rarely ever going for Pitts. I'm fine, being wrong on him. Same thing with TJ Hawkinson. So I'm usually not looking at the tight end position until late 6th round. And so, someone like a Goddard falls to me late 6th round. He's someone I'll usually go with. And then there are a few handful of guys in the later rounds that I'm very high on that I'll potentially reach for. So if I got to wait, I'll wait.
Were there any particular picks or team builds in this draft that surprised you? I know the one that jumped out to me was Team 6, opening up with 4 straight running backs: Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, Travis Etienne. I mean, I guess I can see the 3rd. I was really surprised to see a 4th one.
Yeah, and that's something that we've been seeing quite a bit this year. I've been seeing quite a bit. This, robust to the RB robust extreme to the extreme type build, where some guys will even go 6 straight running backs. But that's definitely surprising in a main event. It's one of those. Okay, not only am I going to take 4 wide receivers, I'm going to go with my 5th wide receiver in the 5th round. and going, Travis Etienne and J.K. Dobbins, I get it from a standpoint of, if you're getting just, great value on certain players, but there's so, few running backs going in the third round that just, we look at as being able to really pay off or exceed, third round value for the most part. And when I'm thinking about, the type of team that I want going into those last 3 weeks of the tournament, I feel like I need a wide receiver that just has boom potential, just like absolute, to the moon potential. And I'm not quite sure that I, see that on that team. Now, that given said, any of those, OBJ could go off for 3 touchdowns if he's the OBJ of old. But, to me, that's a, team that's run first. And so, we'll see. We'll see. It may pay off. He's definitely, has some depth at that position. And I think probably wide receivers, one of the easier positions that you can fill in. But, yeah, it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, I think it's one of those builds that's, a little bit more interesting to try in a best ball draft. And I don't know how many teams that this particular person is drafting. So maybe if they're just drafting a bunch, they want to play around with one. The 2 flex spots gives you flexibility to do different things, because obviously you only need to start 2 running backs every week. You only need to start 2 wide receivers every week. And those 2 other spots can be any of those positions. But I think that for something like this to work out, I mean, all 4 of those running backs basically have to finish probably top 15, because we've seen year over year the drop off at running back is much sharper in terms of weekly PPR scoring than it is at wide receiver. So the running backs start up here, the wide receivers are here, and then the running backs go like this, and the wide receivers are just flatter. So it's just tougher to expect that you're going to start the right wide receivers every week.
Absolutely, and I 100% agree with that. And I thought team 1 was, I was curious as to why they decided to go for Lamar in the 5th round after drafting, A.J. Brown and Julio. I would have assumed that they would have, gone for the Titans stack there, in terms of trying to, wait at that position and get Tannehill. But, you can't fault them. I don't think you have to stack. But I think if I'm getting 2 wide receivers from, the same team, that's a scenario where I'm probably going to be, having that in the back of my mind, because, this type of build, you're really going to probably need both of them to do pretty well.
Yeah, I would tend to focus less on stacking in this kind of format than I would in best ball. But if I'm going to draft both of those wide receivers, I'm pretty much banking on Ryan Tannehill having a huge season if I want to win this tournament.
Exactly.
Now, before I let you go, be honest, what should I have done differently with my team in this draft? And for anybody who's not familiar, I've got team 5.
So, I mean, I got to be quite honest. I love the way you started this draft. Okay. Very high on Zeke. Again, you can just make the argument. This, almost the entire first round is just turning into one large tier, depending on how you want to, construct your team. So, but I love Zeke. I'm very high on him. I think it's a huge bounce back year. Aaron Jones, credit to you for, at least at the time we were drafting, Aaron Rodgers, where he was as far as coming back to the Green Bay versus retirement versus trades was very much up in the air. So I think you took the value, you took a chance there, and that should pay off quite well. You got Justin Jefferson at great value past ADP. He's someone I'm coming around to.
We got lucky on that one.
Yeah, and at first I was questioning whether or not he may be able to repeat it, but I mean after kind of going back and watching some of the games and and just doing a deep dive into him, I feel pretty comfortable that he's likely going to repeat. Cooper Kupp again. I don't want to say that you got lucky there. You took him in the 4th round, but where it may have been seen as okay, maybe you took him just a tad bit ahead of ADP. Honestly, I don't mind anyone that you took him over, to be quite honest. So I really like where you got him there. Tyler Lockett, I mean, hey, everybody loves Tyler Lockett.
Oh, yeah.
So anytime you can get Tyler Lockett in the 5th round, there's nothing wrong with that. And then you got, Dak in the 6th round, a nice, quarterback. Again, Higbee. I'm going through your entire draft here because I really like it. Higbee, I'm still, I just don't know where I'm at on him. Same. I don't have a lot of shares. But if you're going to get him, it's a decent spot to get him in. And obviously with the Akers injury, he could be looking at more volume as well. talked about how much I love Brandon Cooks. Okay. So then now we get to the point where I'm like, eh. So, I mean, you took Leonard Fournette in the 9th round. I mean, how can I fault you for that? You know, like you took a stab. I mean, I don't like Zach Moss. I think I have 0 shares. I understand people passing on Melvin Gordon. I'm a little bit higher. I think I maybe would have taken that chance, but I get it, not drafting a veteran with an incumbent rookie, because towards season end, when especially during the money weeks, more oftentimes than not, the younger guys, getting the majority of the work for whatever reason. I'm not a huge Kenyon Drake fan, so I can't really fault you. And I always look at the board when people are ask why did you take X player? Well, I'm saying look at the players that went around him. I didn't like any of those guys. That's why I took them. So I understand that pick. I love Jamal Williams. The only thing only I want to say issue that I had was in the later part of the draft. There you just took players that I'm just not that high on, but that's a player preference thing. I'm not high on Bateman because I'm higher on Marquise Brown. So you may be right, I may be right. I mean, it's kind of within the realms of each player's possibilities. Sterling Shepard, there are a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. I think we see if anyone kind of continues with the addition of Golladay in terms of their target volume, I think it'll be more Ingram. But again, I mean, he was his favorite target. That O-line has issues. If he's got to get the ball out quick, it's usually going to go to a slot receiver, someone working close to the line. And then the Mo Alley Cox, I'm not a fan. I just, we now this is before training camp started. So, we're already kind of starting to hear about the rookie tight end and, with the Colts. So he's so raw, but he's so athletic. So I get it. I picked him up on a lot of teams last year. The Deshaun Watson pick was a Hail Mary pick. I don't have a lot of Deshaun. I don't think he plays this year. But I understand the pick there. And you did, I think, what a lot of smart drafters did. You took a stab at the Chargers backfield. One of these guys is going to hit.
Yeah.
I think all in all, you had a great job, a great draft. Outside of some player preferences, I don't have much of any issue. I think you're just a little bit light at tight end, which, you'll just have to kind of work on that, maybe in waivers, and maybe unless Higbee, goes off.
Yeah, there were certainly a few things that I would have liked to have seen go differently. I was kind of hoping that Noah Fant was going to linger into round 6, and then maybe I'd choose my quarterback at the next pick, but he didn't get anywhere close, so it wasn't like, I sniped kind of thing. So, yeah, a lot of those later guys are more stabs on what might happen. Rashad Bateman specifically is somebody that I'm trying to see, like, what could happen that's not necessarily predictable, and it very well might be Marquise Brown being the lead receiver there, and Rashad Bateman might be somebody that I cut mid-year, but it's like in the perfect story for him, if he becomes their number 1 wideout and they do throw the ball a little bit more, maybe Rashad Bateman does something special.
I think the consensus falls more in line with your thinking when it comes to that Ravens wide receiver corps. I think I'm on an island when it comes to Marquise Brown, but I gotta go back to that last half of the year, those, last 6-7 games in terms of how they used him, the routes that he was running. I think we see more of that as opposed to him just running a bunch of 9 routes. And again, even on those 9 routes, Lamar was missing him, but I just see more slot work. I see, now he's not seeing that, that number 1 corner every single week. So who knows? I think out of that entire passing offense, Lamar's a guy to have.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, if Bateman and Marquise Brown were going at the same spot, I would swap off shares with both of them.
Oh yeah.
And Marquise Brown, we talked about on our AFC North pod recently. He had a top 10 target share among wide receivers last year. He's a first-round pick from just a few years ago, heading into his 3rd season. So it definitely might remain him as the lead target in Baltimore. It's going to be a fun offense to watch to see exactly how they sort that out. And if you're going to be on an island, then it's best to be stuck there with somebody who's fast enough to run across the water.
That's true. I like the way you put that. I'm going to steal that.
There you go. He is trained to do surgery on your head. He is a co-host of the First and 15 podcast. He is the back-to-back winner of the Football Guys Championship. And if he's lucky, he might even finish second behind me in our FFPC main event league. He is Dr. Abib Agbetoba. Thanks very much for joining me tonight, man.
Thank you so much. It was great to be on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Check out draftsharks.com for all your rankings and content needs, including my recap of this draft that we just talked about. Subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and elsewhere. And tune in next week as we start the live streams for all 6 Draft Sharks Invitational Leagues, including Dr. A here, for my guest, Dr. Abib, Agbetoba, and the entire Draft Sharks crew. I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.